Hearings at the CAS on the doping case of Kamila Valieva were held behind closed doors. The skater herself did not tell how it happened. Maybe he will never tell. But what expert Sergey Ilov revealed some details. What's unusual about the 60 approved drugs? How does the Russian sports system differ from the Western one? And is the decision with a 4-year ban fair? Valieva's defense spoke of 60 supplements as a completely normal phenomenon. What is wrong with it? Ilov is a former member of the supervisory board of the Russian anti-doping agency. He has been living in Finnish Lahti for a long time and has already given up his position at Rusada for 2 years now. Education in the field of sports medicine, research work, knowledge of the Russian language, and an understanding of anti-doping work in Russia are the factors that guided WADA when inviting Sergey to the CAS hearings. It may seem like a big deal, but for me it was just a normal day at work. Here are calls of meetings in September and November last year. Next is a translation of the Finnish Shield material about how Ilov participated in the hearings on Valieva's doping case. Ilov is sitting in the courtroom of the Court of Arbitration for Sport, along with 5 other experts. In addition to the Finn, the agency invited WADA Director of Medicine Olivier Bean and Doctor of the Freiburg University of York Olaf Schumacher. Ilov represented the University of Helsinki. Valieva's defense is being led by sports medicine specialist Edward Beziglov, a longtime doctor of the Russian national football team, as well as the chief doctor of the Russian Olympic team Andrei Zelinsky. Experts made statements on the situation in advance, which will become the subject of discussion. Valieva's defense openly listed 60 different substances that were used as a pharmacological support program to help her exercise. Some of them turned out to be common food additives, like omega-3 fatty acids. And others can be found on the WADA watch list. Substances on this list may be banned, but additional evidence is still needed of their effectiveness as a doping or danger for athletes. One such substance is ecdystyrine, which was developed in the Soviet Union in the late 1970s before the Moscow Olympics. This is a steroid of plant origin, an anabolic substance. There is more and more evidence that it increases performance and promotes, for example, muscle growth, says Ilov. Another substance that attracts attention is hyposine. This is a pharmacological agent that is used to varying degrees in the treatment of diseases. It was developed in the 1970s. It was intended to help the body adapt to heat conditions relevant during the war in Afghanistan. According to Ilov, Russian colleagues in the courtroom talked about Valieva's taking all these medications as a completely normal phenomenon. And he adds that in Russia, national team athletes have been undergoing so-called pharmacological maintenance therapy since the mid-1950s. At that time, it was believed that sports medicine in many ways goes hand in hand with space and military medicine. One of the responsibilities of specialists is to provide athletes with pharmacological agents. Many of these substances have since been banned. However, according to Ilov, history is still firmly embedded in Russian coaching culture. The same doctors treat, for example, personnel of nuclear submarines, athletes, astronauts and military pilots. In the West, pharmacology is used to treat diseases. The goal is completely different. It is considered ethically incorrect to prescribe a drug whose long-term safety has not been sufficiently proven. Although the CAS Commission heard completely different points of view from both Western and Eastern experts, Beziglov and Zelinsky remain steadfast in their position. They feel that they are helping the athlete by supporting him pharmacologically and in such a way that this happens within the framework of international rules. Explains Ilov. The drugs are used to protect the athlete's health so that he can work in extreme conditions. Our views in the West are much stricter. In Russia, old, entrenched practices and views intersect with a new direction, evidence-based medicine. Based on Ilykov's stories, one might get the impression that hopes for a change in attitudes in Russian elite sports are a distant dream. But Sergey doesn't think so. The Valieva case is an example of this. Rusada accused her of violating anti-doping rules and sought punishment along with WADA and ISU. Only a disciplinary body independent of Rusada advocated the abolition of the punishment. But he failed to turn the heads of either Ilov or the Rusada representatives. Views from DAC were different from the very beginning. A strong alliance between sports and the state is a double-edged sword for Russia. The state values elite sports, which is reflected in the status of stars. Ilov compares the status of an athlete with the status of a diplomat. Pharmacology is not the most important factor explaining the results of Russian athletes. In Russia, they invest a lot in sports and value it completely differently than in the West. But this marriage between sport and government makes it difficult to update the established way of doing things in a country of 140 million people. Centralization, familiar from the Soviet Union, is actively present in sports. This is reflected in the abbreviation FMBA, Federal Medical and Biological Agency, which is repeated 21 times in the CAS decision. This is an institution that monitors the labor protection of soldiers in closed cities. This nationwide medical network also takes care of the athletes of national teams. Valieva received pharmacological support from the official body. Judging by Ilyakov's experience, the position of the individual Russian athlete in the larger national system is far from simple. Questions remain about the athlete's responsibility, since under international anti-doping rules, it is he who is responsible for what is found in his body. But how can 15-year-old Valieva be brought to justice? Ilyakov does not want to assess the degree of Kamila's guilt. I did not decide whether Valieva's defense was credible. But based on our discussions, the CAS panel concluded that the scenario presented to the court was not credible. And I couldn't agree more. The CAS panel made a decision based on the evidence presented. And I agree with him. To understand the details, you need to take into account all opinions and the entire process, which turned out to be large-scale. And CAS did it.